Admiral Park Jin was sleeping in his quarters at Earth Defense Command when the emergency alarm woke him up. It was 3 in the morning, and he had been planning to sleep until sunrise, but the red lights flashing in his room told him that something very important was happening. He put on his uniform quickly and ran to the command center. When Admiral Park arrived at the command center, he found dozens of military officers and scientists gathered around computer screens. Everyone looked worried and excited at the same time. General Han Su walked over to him with a tablet computer in his hands. The general's face was serious, and Park Jin knew immediately that this was not a normal emergency. General Han Su showed Admiral Park the message that had come from the Deep Space Monitoring Station. The translation of the alien distress call was displayed on the screen, and Park Jin read it carefully. His hands started shaking as he realized what he was looking at. This was first contact with alien life, and it was happening during a genocide. Within 2 hours, every important military leader on Earth had been called to an emergency meeting. The Defense Council gathered in the secure briefing room deep underground beneath the command center. These were the people who made decisions about war and peace for all of humanity. And now they faced the biggest decision in human history. Dr. Choi Min arrived at the meeting carrying files full of information about what they knew about the alien species. She was Earth's best expert on the possibility of alien life, and she had been studying the Thaylen message for hours. Her analysis was both fascinating and terrifying. The Thaylens were herbivores who had never developed weapons for war. They were completely helpless against the Mordak attack. General Han Su presented the military analysis to the council. The Mordak fleet that was attacking the Thaylen world consisted of 47 warships. Their technology seemed to be about the same level as human technology, but they specialized in different types of weapons. The Mordaks used energy beams and plasma weapons, while humans had focused more on missiles and kinetic weapons. Captain Yun Da commanded one of Earth's most advanced stealth ships, and she had been called to the meeting to give her opinion about military options. She stood up and pointed to the star charts displayed on the wall screen. The Mordak fleet was spread out around the Thaylen planet, focusing on bombardment rather than defense. This gave human forces a potential advantage if they could attack quickly and with surprise. The debate in the council room went on for hours. Some members argued that humanity should not get involved in alien wars that they did not understand. Others pointed out that the Mordaks might eventually threaten Earth if they continued expanding their empire. Everyone agreed that this was the most important decision that humans had ever had to make. Admiral Park Jin listened to all the arguments, but his mind was already made up. The Thaylen message had described children hiding in bunkers while alien monsters hunted them down. No military officer could hear that and do nothing. The question was not whether to help, but how to help effectively. Dr. Choi Min presented more analysis about the two alien species. The Thaylens were peaceful farmers and artists who had built a beautiful civilization based on cooperation and learning. The Mordaks were predators from a low-gravity world who had built their entire society around conquest and domination. They had been destroying other civilizations for centuries. Captain Yun Da explained that the human fleet could reach the Thaylen system in about 3 days, if they left immediately. The Mordaks would not be expecting any interference because, as far as they knew, there were no other spacefaring civilizations in this region of the galaxy. Surprise would be humanity's greatest weapon. General Han Su showed satellite images of the human war fleet that was always ready for launch. Earth had been preparing for possible alien contact for decades, and they had built their military, assuming that any aliens they met might be hostile. The ships were designed for war, with weapons that could destroy entire cities. The final vote was unanimous. Every member of the Defense Council agreed that humanity would respond to the Thaylen distress call. Earth would launch the largest military fleet in human history to fight aliens they had never seen before in order to save people they had never met. This was either the most heroic decision in human history or the most foolish. Admiral Park Jin was given command of the mission, and he immediately began planning the attack. The human fleet would jump into the Thaylen system and destroy the Mordak forces before they could finish their genocide. It was a simple plan, but it would require perfect timing and overwhelming firepower within 6 hours of receiving the distress call. Earth was preparing for its first interstellar war. The shipyards in orbit around Earth began loading weapons and supplies onto warships. Thousands of soldiers and spaceship crews reported for duty, knowing that they were about to fight in the most important battle in human history. The news about alien contact was kept secret from most of the population, but word spread quickly through the military. Everyone wanted to volunteer for the mission. Soldiers who had trained their entire lives for combat finally had a chance to fight for something that really mattered. They were going to save an entire alien civilization from extinction. Admiral Park Jin stood on the bridge of his flagship and watched as the human war fleet assembled in space around Earth. The sight was both beautiful and terrifying. Over 200 warships of different sizes and types, all armed with the most advanced weapons that human technology could create, the fleet was ready to deliver Earth's message to the Mordak Empire. As the final preparations were completed, Admiral Park Jin thought about the Thaylen children who were hiding underground while their world burned above them. He thought about their parents who were trying to keep them safe, and their teachers who had sent out the distress call, hoping that someone somewhere would remember them after they died. The human fleet was about to show the Mordaks that someone had indeed heard the Thaylen cry for help. Earth was coming, and they were bringing enough firepower to turn the tide of an interstellar war. The age of human isolation was ending, and it was ending with thunder. Captain Lee Hyun rubbed his tired eyes and looked at the computer screens in front of him. The coffee cup next to his keyboard had gone cold hours ago, but he did not care much about that right now. He had been working at the Deep Space Monitoring Station for 20 years, and he knew that most days were just boring routine work. The big radio dishes outside were always listening to space, but they usually only heard background noise from stars and empty space. His assistant, Kim Nari, was working at the computer station next to him. She was much younger than Lee Hyun and still got excited about small things in their work. Today she was running tests on their newest equipment, the quantum receivers that could pick up very weak signals from far away in space. The machines were humming quietly and showing lots of numbers and graphs on their screens. It was just after midnight and most of the other workers had gone home. Lee Hyun liked the quiet night shifts because there were fewer people around to bother him. He could focus better on his work and think more clearly about what he was seeing on the monitors. The station was located on a mountain far from any big cities, so there were no lights to interfere with their equipment. Suddenly, Kim Nari made a surprised sound and pointed at her screen. Lee Hyun looked over and saw something that made his heart beat faster. There was a signal coming through that was different from anything they had seen before. It was not random noise from space, and it was not coming from any human satellites or space stations. This signal had a pattern to it, like someone was trying to send a message. Lee Hyun got up from his chair and walked over to Kim Nara's station. He could see the signal waves, moving across her screen in regular patterns. The computer was already trying to figure out what the signal meant, but it would take some time. The signal was very weak, which meant it was coming from very far away, but it was definitely made by intelligent beings, not by natural space objects. Other workers in the station started to notice what was happening. They gathered around Kim Nara's computer to watch as the translation programs worked on the mysterious signal. Lee Hyun felt nervous and excited. At the same time, this could be the most important discovery in human history. They might be receiving the first message from aliens. After 30 minutes, the computer finally had some answers. The signal was indeed from an alien species, and it was a distress call. Lee Hyun read the translated message on the screen and felt his stomach drop. The message was heartbreaking and terrible at the same time. The aliens called themselves the Thaylen people, and they were dying. Their home world was under attack by another alien species called the Mordak Empire. The Mordaks were destroying their cities and killing their people. The Thaylens were asking anyone who could hear their message to remember them after they were gone. Lee Hyun read more of the message and learned that the Thaylens were peaceful people who had never hurt anyone. They were farmers and artists and teachers who just wanted to live quiet lives on their beautiful world. But the Mordaks wanted their planet for its resources, and they did not care about killing everyone who lived there. The message was not really asking for help, because the Thaylens did not think anyone would come to save them. They just wanted someone somewhere in the galaxy to know that they had existed. They wanted their stories and their art to be remembered even after they were all dead. Kim Nari had tears in her eyes as she read the translation. She was young and had always dreamed that first contact with aliens would be wonderful and peaceful. Instead, they were listening to an entire civilization saying goodbye to the universe. The Thaylens were sending information about their culture, their music, their poetry, and their love for their families. Lee Hyun felt anger building up inside him. The Thaylens sounded like good people who did not deserve to die. He had spent his whole career hoping to find intelligent life in space, and now that he had found it, someone was murdering them. The message described how Mordak ships were bombing their cities, and how alien soldiers were hunting down anyone who tried to hide. The distress call explained that the Mordaks were an empire that had been conquering worlds for hundreds of years. They would attack peaceful planets, kill or enslave everyone who lived there, and then strip the worlds of all valuable resources. The Thaylens were just the latest victims in a long history of genocide. What made Lee Hyun even angrier was that the Thaylens' message showed they had tried to surrender. They had offered to give the Mordaks anything they wanted if they would just stop killing civilians. But the Mordak Empire was not interested in peace or negotiation. They seemed to enjoy the destruction and suffering they caused. The message also contained star charts showing where the Thaylen world was located. It was only 3 star systems away from Earth, which was very close in galactic terms. Lee Hyun realized that if the Mordaks were expanding their empire in this direction, they might eventually threaten Earth too. As he read more of the translation, Lee Hyun learned that the attack had been going on for several days already. The Thaylens estimated that more than half their population was already dead. The rest were hiding in underground shelters. But the Mordak weapons were so powerful that even deep bunkers could not protect people for long. The most heartbreaking part of the message was when the Thaylens described their children. They talked about how they were trying to keep the young ones calm and safe, but there was nowhere left to run. The alien parents were telling their children stories and singing songs to help them not be afraid of death. Kim. Nari was crying openly now, and several other workers had to wipe their eyes. Lee Hyun felt his hands shaking with rage. These were not soldiers or warriors sending the message. These were innocent people who just wanted to live in peace and raise their families. The Mordaks were monsters who killed for pleasure. The final. Part of the Thailand message was a plea for anyone who received it to carry on their memory. They included recordings of their music, samples of their art, and stories about their history and culture. They wanted the universe to know that they had loved beauty and knowledge, and that they had tried to make their world a better place. Lee Hyun stood in the quiet monitoring station surrounded by his shocked colleagues. The weight of what they had discovered was enormous. They were the first humans to make contact with alien intelligence, and they were witnessing genocide. The peaceful first contact that everyone had dreamed about had turned into a nightmare. Without saying a word, Lee Hyun walked back to his station and opened the emergency communication channel that connected directly to Earth Defense Command. His fingers moved quickly over the keyboard as he composed the most important message of his life. He kept it simple but made sure it conveyed the urgency of the situation. The message he sent was short, but it carried the weight of humanity's first encounter with the galaxy alien species under genocide attack. Request immediate intervention authorization. Lee Hyun hesitated for just a moment before hitting the send button. He knew that this message would change everything. As the signal raced toward Earth Defense Command headquarters, Lee Hyun looked around at his colleagues. Everyone was staring at him with wide eyes. They all understood that they had just witnessed history being made. The age of human isolation was over. The galaxy was full of life, but it was also full of monsters. Kim Nari walked over to Lee Hyun's station and put her hand on his shoulder. She did not need to say anything. They both knew that. They had just discovered their neighbors in space, and someone was murdering them. The question now was whether humanity would do anything about it. The Thailand distress call continued to play on the speakers, filling the monitoring station with the voices of the dying. Their words were beautiful and sad, and they spoke of hope that somewhere in the universe someone would remember their love and their dreams. Lee Hyun closed his eyes and made a silent promise that the Thalans would not be forgotten. Commander Oh Sung stood on the bridge of the massive dreadnought New Seoul and watched through the viewports as hundreds of human warships moved into formation around Earth. The sight was incredible and terrifying at the same time. Every major nation on Earth had contributed ships to the fleet, and now they were all working together for the first time in decades. The human war fleet was unlike anything that had ever been assembled before in history. These ships had been designed by engineers who understood that Earth was a dangerous world, and that any aliens humans might meet could be equally dangerous. Every vessel was armed with weapons that could destroy cities and shielded with armor that could survive almost anything. Lieutenant Bae Sun worked at the communication station aboard the command ship and coordinated the complex task of organizing over 200 warships for interstellar travel. Each ship had different capabilities and different roles in the coming battle. The logistics were incredibly complicated, but human military training had prepared them for exactly this kind of challenge. The crews loading onto the ships were volunteers from every branch of Earth's military forces. These were soldiers, sailors, pilots, and technicians who had grown up on a world where the air was poisonous, the water was contaminated, and the radiation levels would kill most alien species. They were the products of millions of years of evolution on a planet that tried to kill everything that lived on it. Captain Kim Ho commanded the destroyer Busan Revenge, and he spent the final hours before departure checking every system on his ship twice. His crew had trained for space combat for years, but this would be their first real battle against alien enemies. They were nervous, but they were also eager to prove that human military training was superior to anything the galaxy had to offer. The missile boats were loaded with the most advanced guided weapons that human technology could produce. Each missile was essentially a small computer with engines and explosives attached. They could think for themselves, track moving targets, and penetrate enemy defenses. Human engineers had spent decades perfecting these weapons, and now they would be tested against alien armor. The larger ships carried plasma cannons, particle beam weapons, and rail guns that could accelerate projectiles to significant fractions of light speed. The human military had always believed that in space combat speed and accuracy mattered more than size and intimidation. Their weapons were designed to hit fast-moving targets at long range with devastating effect. Support vessels carried medical supplies, repair equipment, and everything else the fleet would need for an extended military campaign far from Earth. The human commanders knew that once they jumped to the Thalen system, they would be completely on their own, with no possibility of reinforcement or resupply. As the departure time approached, Commander Oh-sung received reports from every ship in the fleet. All vessels were ready for combat. All weapon systems were operational. All crews were at battle stations. The largest military force in human history was prepared to travel across interstellar space to fight aliens they had never seen before. The final briefing was transmitted to every ship in the fleet. Admiral Park Jin appeared on screens throughout the Armada and reminded everyone why they were risking their lives. The Thalans were innocent people who were being murdered by alien monsters. Earth had the power to stop the genocide, and therefore Earth had the responsibility to act. Lieutenant Bae-sun monitored the countdown sequence as each ship prepared to engage its faster-than-light drive. The journey to the Thalen system would take exactly 72 hours. During that time, the Mordak bombardment would continue, and more innocent aliens would die. Every minute counted in this race across the galaxy. The launch sequence began exactly on schedule. One by one, the human warships activated their FTL drives and disappeared into the strange realm of hyperspace, where the normal rules of physics did not apply. The ships would travel faster, then light, while their crews remained in normal time, experiencing the journey as 3 days of preparation for battle. As the last ships vanished from Earth orbit, something fundamental changed in humanity's relationship with the universe. They were no longer alone on their dangerous world. They were part of a larger community of intelligent species, and someone was threatening their neighbors. The response would be swift, decisive, and absolutely devastating. The Mordak Empire had been conquering helpless civilizations for centuries, and they had grown arrogant and careless. They expected no resistance from anyone because no one had ever been strong enough to resist them. What they did not know was that their latest act of genocide had awakened something terrible. Humanity had evolved on a world that was constantly trying to kill them. They had survived ice ages, plagues, asteroid impacts, supervolcano eruptions, and countless wars against each other. They were the ultimate survivors, and now they were coming to help people who had never learned how to fight. The human fleet raced through hyperspace, carrying a message for the Mordak Empire. The message was simple and direct: stop the genocide or face the consequences. Earth had heard the Thalen distress call, and Earth was responding with overwhelming force. The age of unchallenged alien conquest was about to end. The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Thalen system, and what they saw made every crew member feel sick with rage. The beautiful blue-green world that should have been home to billions of peaceful aliens was covered in smoke, and fire orbital stations hung in broken pieces around the planet like shattered glass. Admiral Park. Jin stood on the bridge of his flagship and studied the tactical display that showed the positions of all the Mordak ships. The alien fleet was spread out around the dying planet with their weapons pointed downward toward the surface. They were systematically destroying every city, every farm, every sign of civilization on the world below. Captain Kim Ho aboard the destroyer, Busan Revenge, felt his hands clench into fists as he watched the enemy bombardment continue. The Mordaks were not just conquering the planet. They were enjoying the destruction. They were taking their time and making sure that every Thaylen suffered before dying. This was not war. It was torture on a planetary scale. The Mordak ships were large and intimidating, but they were positioned all wrong for actual combat. They had arranged themselves for maximum terror effect rather than tactical advantage. Their formation was designed to frighten helpless victims, not to fight against determined enemies who knew how to use weapons effectively. Lieutenant Seo Jin monitored enemy communications from her station aboard the cruiser, Incheon Fury. The translation. Computers were already learning the Mordak language, and the intercepted messages revealed that the aliens were completely confident and relaxed. They were discussing how to divide up the planet's resources after they finished killing everyone, Admiral. Park Jin opened fleet-wide communications and spoke to every human warrior in the Armada. His voice was calm, but everyone could hear the controlled anger underneath his words. The Mordaks had made the mistake of committing genocide within reach of Earth, and now they were going to learn what happened when you threatened innocent people in front of Deathworlders. The attack began with a massive missile strike launched from maximum range. Human weapons were different from anything the Mordaks had ever encountered. Instead of energy beams or plasma bolts, the humans used guided projectiles that could think for themselves and adjust their flight paths to hit moving targets. Thousands of missiles streaked across the void toward the unsuspecting Mordak fleet. Each weapon was equipped with advanced sensors and artificial intelligence that allowed it to select the most vulnerable part of its target. The missiles were designed to penetrate armor and explode inside enemy ships where they would cause maximum damage. The first impacts came as a complete surprise to the Mordak commanders. Their shields were designed to stop energy weapons, but they were nearly useless against physical projectiles moving at relativistic speeds. Ship after ship exploded in brilliant flashes as human missiles tore through their hulls and detonated their ammunition storage areas. Captain Oh-sung watched from the bridge of the New Seoul as the enemy fleet tried to respond to the unexpected attack. The Mordak ships began turning toward the human fleet, but their movements were slow and clumsy. They had been built for intimidation, not for maneuvering in actual combat. The human ships moved like a school of fish or a flock of birds responding instantly to changes in the tactical situation. They had been designed by engineers who understood that in space, combat agility and speed were more important than size and armor. The smaller human vessels danced around the larger alien ships, avoiding their weapons while delivering devastating attacks. Lieutenant Bae Sun coordinated the fleet communications as the battle developed. The human commanders shared information instantly, allowing them to concentrate their fire on the most dangerous enemy, ships first. The Mordaks were trying to communicate with each other, but their signals were being jammed by human electronic warfare systems. The Mordak weapons were powerful, but they could not hit targets that moved unpredictably. The alien gunners had been trained to shoot at helpless planets and defenseless space stations. They had never faced enemies who shot back with equal firepower and superior tactics, Commander. Osung watched as his ship weapons tore apart a Mordak cruiser that had been bombarding a Thaylen city just minutes before the alien vessel broke apart in a shower of debris and expanding gas clouds. Its crew had never expected to face opponents who were as dangerous as they were within 2 hours of the battle beginning. The Mordak fleet was completely destroyed. Those few ships that tried to retreat found themselves hunted down by human vessels that were faster and more maneuverable. The survivors sent desperate messages calling for reinforcements, but the human electronic warfare systems made sure those signals never reached their destination. The last Mordak ship exploded in a brilliant flash of light, and then there was silence in the Thaylen system. The bombardment had stopped. The orbital space around the wounded planet was filled with debris from the destroyed alien fleet. Earth had delivered its message, and the message was written in fire and twisted metal. Admiral Park Jin looked at the tactical display that now showed only human ships and floating wreckage. The first battle between humanity and alien enemies was over, and it had been a complete victory. But the real work was just beginning. The Thaylen world was still dying, and there were innocent people who needed help. Commander Li Bo stood in the cargo bay of the medical ship Soul Hope and watched as teams of doctors, nurses, and rescue specialists prepared for the most important mission of their lives. The ship was loaded with medical equipment, emergency supplies, and everything needed to help the survivors of an alien genocide. The shuttles launched from every human vessel in the fleet, carrying humanitarian aid teams down to the surface of the wounded Thaylen world. The planet was covered in smoke from burning cities, but thermal scanners showed that there were still millions of survivors hiding in underground shelters and damaged buildings. Dr. Yoon-A was a trauma surgeon from Seoul Medical Center, and she had volunteered for this mission because she wanted to be the first human doctor to treat alien patients. Her shuttle landed in what had been the capital city of the Thaylen world, but now it looked like a war zone with broken buildings and rubble-filled streets. The first face-to-face meeting between humans and Thaylens happened in a bombed hospital where alien doctors had been trying to treat injured civilians with very limited supplies. Dr. Yoon-A walked through the damaged building and saw creatures that were both alien and strangely familiar at the same time. The Thaylens were tall, graceful beings with large, intelligent eyes and delicate features that conveyed gentleness and wisdom. They moved slowly because many of them were injured, but they tried to help the human medical teams, even though they were exhausted and traumatized by days of bombardment. When the first Thaylen spoke to Dr. Yoon-A through the translation device, she felt tears running down her face. The alien voice was soft and musical and full of wonder. The creature said, "You came. You heard our message and you came. But we never asked for help. We only wanted someone to remember us." Captain Park. Hay coordinated the rescue operations from orbit and established communication with Thaylen survivors who had maintained their emergency communication systems. The stories they told were heartbreaking, but they also revealed important information about the Mordak Empire and its methods of conquest. The Thaylens explained that the Mordaks had attacked without any warning or demands for surrender. The alien empire simply appeared in their system and began destroying everything they could find. When the Thaylens tried to negotiate, the Mordaks responded by increasing the intensity of their bombardment major. Choi Da led ground teams that investigated the abandoned Mordak positions, and what they found made everyone angry. The aliens had been planning to strip mine the entire planet after they finished killing everyone who lived there. They had no interest in preserving anything about Thaylen civilization. The most disturbing discovery came from Thaylen archives that had survived the bombardment. The peaceful aliens had detailed records of Mordak expansion across the galaxy, and the information revealed a pattern of genocide that stretched back for centuries. Dozens of intelligent species had been completely wiped out. The record showed that the Mordak Empire had been systematically destroying every civilization they encountered, regardless of whether those civilizations posed any threat. The aliens seemed to enjoy the process of conquest and extermination, and they had been expanding their territory steadily for hundreds of years. Dr. Yun Ai worked alongside Thaylen doctors to treat the wounded, and she learned that these aliens had never developed military medicine because they had never fought wars. Their medical knowledge was advanced in some ways, but they had no experience with treating the kinds of injuries caused by modern weapons. The human medical teams were able to save thousands of Thaylen lives using trauma treatment techniques that had been developed during centuries of human warfare. The irony was not lost on anyone that the same violent history that made humans dangerous also made them excellent at healing the victims of violence. Captain Park Hay received reports from intelligence teams that had analyzed captured Mordak equipment, and the news was both good and bad. The alien technology was roughly equivalent to human technology, but it was designed differently. The Mordaks relied on brute force, while humans emphasized precision and adaptability. The most shocking revelation came when Major Choi Da found star charts in a destroyed Mordak command center. The charts showed that the alien empire had been planning to expand toward Earth space. Within the next 50 years, humanity had not just saved the Thaylens, they had prevented their own future extinction. As the rescue operations continued, and more information was gathered about Mordak activities, the scope of the alien threat became clear. This was not just one act of genocide, but part of a larger campaign of extermination that had been going on for generations. The Mordak Empire was a plague that had been spreading across the galaxy unchecked. The Thaylens shared their historical records with human scholars, and the information painted a terrifying picture. The Mordaks had destroyed civilizations that were more advanced than Earth, and they had wiped out species that had existed for millions of years. The scale of the genocide was almost impossible to comprehend. Dr. Yun sat with a young Thaylen who had lost her entire family in the bombardment and listened as the alien child described the beauty of her world before the attack. The Thaylens had been artists and philosophers who created music and poetry that celebrated the wonder of existence. Now their culture was almost extinct. The human rescue teams worked around the clock to save as many Thaylens as possible, but everyone knew that this was just the beginning. The Mordak Empire was still out there, and there were probably other worlds under attack right now. Other innocent civilizations were crying for help that might never come, as reports from the surface continued to arrive. Admiral Park Jin realized that humanity faced a choice that would define their future. They could withdraw to their own space and hope the Mordaks never found Earth, or they could accept the responsibility that came with being the only species in this region of the galaxy capable of stopping genocide. The decision was not really difficult. The same instincts that had made humans protect their own families and tribes now extended to include alien species who could not protect themselves. Earth had become the guardian of the innocent, whether they wanted the job or not. 6 months after the Battle of Thaylen, the galaxy was a completely different place. Word of the Mordak defeat had spread through alien communication networks, carrying with it whispers and stories about the mysterious species that had appeared from nowhere to destroy an entire fleet in a single day. Some aliens called them demons, others called them angels, but everyone agreed they were dangerous. Admiral Park Jin stood in the command center of the newly constructed orbital station above the restored Thalen homeworld and watched as human and alien engineers worked together to rebuild what had been destroyed. The cooperation between the two species had produced amazing results that neither could have achieved alone. The Thalen Chancellor was an elderly being named Vel Tar, whose family had been saved by human medical teams during the rescue operations. He approached Admiral Park with news that would change galactic politics forever. 3 more alien species had secretly sent envoys. Requesting protection from Mordak expansion, Captain Kim Min now commanded the permanent defense fleet stationed in Thalen space, and she reviewed intelligence reports that painted a disturbing picture of the galaxy the Mordak Empire controlled. Dozens of star systems and commanded resources that were far greater than anything humanity could match, but they had also made a crucial mistake. The Mordaks had grown arrogant after centuries of easy victories against species that had never learned to fight. They had built their entire military around the concept of terrorizing helpless victims, and they were not prepared to face opponents who could fight back with equal determination and superior tactics. Lieutenant Commander C.O. Young analyzed, intercepted Mordak communications, and discovered that the aliens had been studying the wreckage of their destroyed fleet, trying to understand human technology. What they found had terrified them beyond anything they had ever experienced before. The Mordaks were calling humans the Death Spawn and Void Demons, because human weapons seemed to think for themselves, and human ships moved like living creatures. The alien empire had never encountered guided missiles that could adjust their flight, paths or armor that could repair itself automatically. The response from Earth was swift and decisive. If the Mordaks wanted a war, humanity would give them a war that they would never forget. The industrial capacity that had built colonies across Earth's solar system was redirected toward military production. Shipyards that had constructed exploration vessels began building warships designed for one purpose. The new human warships were even more advanced than the fleet that had saved the Thalans. They incorporated lessons learned from the first battle and included improvements suggested by Thalan scientists who understood alien technology. The combined human-Thalan engineering teams were producing weapons that neither species could have created alone. Dr. Choi Min established research facilities on the Thalen homeworld, where human and alien scientists worked together to understand the broader threat posed by the Mordak Empire. The peaceful aliens had maintained detailed records of galactic history, and their archives contained information about dozens of extinct civilizations. The research revealed that the Mordak Empire had been accelerating their expansion after learning about the existence of humans. They were trying to conquer as many worlds as possible before the Death Spawn could interfere again. The timeline had changed from gradual expansion to desperate conquest. Reports began arriving from deep space monitoring stations about massive fleet movements throughout Mordak-controlled territory. The alien empire was mobilizing every ship they had for what appeared to be a final campaign to eliminate all potential threats to their dominance. The war was about to become much larger. Captain Yunda commanded the scout ships that monitored Mordak activities, and her reports showed that the aliens were not just preparing to fight humans, They were accelerating their genocide campaigns against other species, trying to eliminate as many civilizations as possible before facing organized resistance. The most disturbing intelligence came from alien refugees who had escaped from Mordak-controlled worlds. The Empire was using increasingly brutal methods of conquest, including biological weapons and planet-killing devices. They seemed to be in a panic about the possibility of facing more opponents like humanity. Admiral Park Jin called a meeting of all human military commanders and allied alien leaders to discuss the growing crisis. The Mordak Empire had revealed its true nature as a plague of genocide that had been spreading across the galaxy for centuries. Now they were desperate, and desperate enemies were the most dangerous kind. The decision facing humanity was enormous. They could retreat to their own region of space and hope that the Mordaks would be satisfied with conquering everything else, or they could accept their role as the guardians of innocent species and fight to stop genocide wherever it occurred. The debate was shorter than anyone expected. Every human commander voted to expand their mission from defending the Thalans to protecting any species that asked for help. The same protective instincts that had driven humans to answer the first distress call now extended to the entire galaxy. As the meeting ended and preparations began for the larger war ahead, Admiral Park Jin thought about the chain of events that had started with a single alien distress call. Humanity had been alone in the universe just 6 months ago. Now they were the leaders of a growing alliance of species united against genocide. The Mordak Empire was about to learn what happened when apex predators decided to protect their neighbors. The age of unchecked conquest was ending. And it was ending because humans had heard someone crying for help in the darkness. The galaxy would never be the same again. Earth had received a distress call from across the void, and they had answered it with fire and fury. Now the universe knew that somewhere in the darkness Deathworlders were listening, and when innocent people called for help, Earth children would come carrying messages written in missiles and hope forged from the hearts of dying stars.